All right, so this now. Power blackouts have unfortunately become a way of life in South Africa, and Eskom is working with aging infrastructure, including generator breakdowns, which have become a commonplace. Evidence of this is the fact that we are in the midst of stage 2 blackouts, and with the rainy season approaching, how much of the country, of course, is concerned about coal? Well, to discuss this even further, we're now joined by Eskom CEO, Mr. Ruyter. Mr. Ruyter, thank you for your time and good morning to you. Sure, I don't think South Africans expected to be in this position. Rainy season, rainy weather, and then we're in the midst of load shedding. From your perspective and what you're dealing with, how long should we expect these power cuts, blackouts, or load shedding, as you term them, to last for?
Good morning to all the viewers, and apologies again for load shedding. It's not an ideal situation. We recognize that. We're doing our best to emerge from it as soon as possible. So we're doing a lot of repair work, and our current planning is that we will lift load shedding by tomorrow morning, and that should then enable us to go into election season, which of course is very important from a democratic process perspective, without any load shedding going forward. That's the current planning as it stands.
Yeah, so is this more of a short-term situation the country is dealing with, that Eskom is dealing with, or should we be still expecting more controlled load shedding for the next couple of years to come?
The fact of the matter is that we have a shortage in generation capacity of between 4,000 and 5,000 megawatts. And that is really what we need in addition to our existing aging power generation system, which of course is very susceptible to breakdowns and failures. And once we have that capacity added to the grid, we see that there will be a significant improvement in the stability of power generation. At the moment where we are, of course, we had the explosion at Medupi 4, we had a fire at Kendal Unit 1, and then we had 2 conveyor belt failures at Tuka, and those were the main reasons why we are in the situation where we are unfortunately not able to meet demand. So not much to do with the rainy season. We are well prepared for the rainy season, but I think at this point in time, once we have repaired those Tuka units and they're coming back online as we speak, we will be in a situation to meet demand.
Right. Mr. Ruyter, just this past couple of days alone, parts of Gauteng had experienced extended power outages. I think parts of, the city of Ekurhuleni, the city of Tshwane, just to name a few. What could be the cause of this? Because it seems that even after load shedding, the schedule had ended in those areas, they still experience those extended power outages.
I think part of the reason that, from our perspective, these outages occur is that the municipal infrastructure, to whom, of course, we supply as our customers, that municipal infrastructure is also not well maintained and are therefore not able to cope with the switching on and off that occurs with load shedding. And that leads to these extended outages, which, of course, exacerbates the frustration caused by the lack of generation capacity.
And just moving from, the cities, in Gauteng, such as, Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, or even Johannesburg, to name a few. Let's go to Soweto. I had a conversation with the city of Johannesburg mayor, that is Mpumwerani, who informed us right here on eNCA that they would be taking over, the power situation in Soweto as the city of Johannesburg, saying that, it seems the 12 billion rand that Eskom claims as a debt from Soweto, it's not necessarily as authentic as it seems. They're saying they still need to investigate the authenticity of this particular debt. I suppose my 2 questions to you is, number one, can you verify from Eskom's perspective that indeed you are handing over that responsibility to the city of Johannesburg? And number 2, if indeed that the debt, as the mayor has said, that they're still going with those investigations because they have the suspicion or the view that the 12 billion rand may not be the accurate number you claim to be the overall debt?
So we've been in discussions with City of Joburg for an extended period of time with a view to transferring certain distribution areas, in particular Soweto. We view that aligning political accountability and operational accountability is the best way to improve payment levels. And therefore, from our point of view, we think that it's a positive move. City of Johannesburg to take over Soweto. Clearly, like with any major corporate merger and acquisition, what needs to be done is that there needs to be a due diligence. The parties need to ascertain whether or not the values that are claimed are valid or not. We don't expect City of Joburg just to write out a check on our say-so. We fully expect them to do their due diligence. The current outstanding Soweto debt, after writing off so-called in duplum interest, where you charge interest on interest, which by law we are restricted from doing, is at about 7.9 billion. But we will be engaging with City of Johannesburg to understand exactly how we can have a meeting of minds on the exact quantum and what money needs to flow in what direction between the two parties in order to effect the transfer of these assets.
Yeah, so for clarity's sake, for the 7.9 billion rand that you make mention of, if I heard correctly there, how will you then as Eskom recover that debt?
So that debt is reflected as an asset in our books. It is not a liability, it's an asset. So upon the transfer, we would then seek to be compensated for that outstanding debt, because that is obviously in lieu of electricity that we supplied to Soweto but weren't paid for. So that is what we would seek to recover upon transfer of that distribution area.
Right. Mr. Ruyter, I'm sure you are aware of some of the criticism that you have also faced, steering the ship there by Eskom. And I just want to make mention of one. Energy expert Ted Bloom making mention that, exactly 18 months ago, reminding that you made the promise that you would, of course, be dealing with the plant's refurbishment. But it seems you made an about turn in saying the budget that you would be receiving, obviously, for those, plant's refurbishment would now be used for renewables. Just for clarity's sake, I suppose the criticism being that would be then sitting with broken plants and therefore they would not be refurbished as promised. What's the plan when it comes to your strategy for renewables?
I think Mr. Blom, unfortunately, is a little confused, and he has been for some time. And he needs to, I think, listen more carefully to what Eskom is saying. We have not cut back on our maintenance budget for repairing the existing generation kit. As a matter of fact, we've just recently released more funds in order to ensure that we can keep up with our accelerated outage schedule. So there's absolutely no truth to the perception that Mr. Blom unfortunately has caused, that we are somehow cutting back on maintenance in order to accelerate the demise of coal. Nothing could be further from the truth. We are a responsible utility company. We wouldn't want to undermine our own generation capacity. What we have said is that there is a significant amount of money that we need to spend, about 300 billion rand, on environmental compliance from an emissions perspective. We know that our power stations were designed in an era where emissions regulations were significantly less stringent than they are now. And in order for us to make those old plants compliant, we need to spend this 300 billion. And from our perspective, rather than investing in an asset that, yes, results in cleaner air, but doesn't add any new generation capacity, doesn't add any return on invested capital, let's rather see if we can divert those funds to invest in low and no carbon generation assets, which will, in the longer term, solve our generation shortfall issues.
Yeah, and just for clarity again, so there's no confusion, because it seems that the concern was that, are you referring to, when talking about renewables, are you talking about, storage plants or battery storage? And if that's the case, are they available? Is that even a capacity? Is that even a possibility to have a utility-based, storage facility?
Yes, so we, of course, already have existing pumped storage capacity that we are operating today as we speak. We are in the process of procuring some 14 billion rand of battery storage capacity under a project sponsored by the World Bank. So that project is ongoing. And the reason why we will have to invest in more storage capacity is that renewable energy obviously is only generated when the sun shines and the wind blows. And in order to cater for this lack of predictability, you need to have a bigger storage buffer. Now, this is not a binary challenge that we face. This is not a question of tomorrow switching off all coal-fired power stations and moving wholesale to renewables. This is a process, a just energy transition process, about which I've been talking frequently, in order to ensure that we can manage this migration from being one of the biggest carbon emitters in the world on a per capita basis to a far cleaner and greener electricity supply industry by facilitating investment in renewable energies. But this will take 10 to 15 years for us to gradually phase in more renewables as we close down those old, tired power stations that are at the end of their lives.
All right. Well, I have to let you go in a few minutes. Before I do, my last question to you being obviously concerns about whether or not load shedding will impact on the elections and Christmas. South Africans wondering if they will be able to vote without, any load shedding, and if they will have a dark Christmas. Would that be the case?
So we are planning very carefully to do everything in our power to ensure that there is no load shedding around elections. We fully understand that this is a very important democratic process, and we wish to enable and facilitate that. And therefore, we are bolstering our reserves. We are really looking at where we have known defects, that we repair those defects in advance of election day in order to minimize the risk of any load shedding on election day. Christmas is concerned, fortunately, demand over the Christmas period is traditionally very low, and therefore we don't anticipate that there will be any load shedding over the Christmas period.
Eskom CEO, Mr. Ruyter, I appreciate your time this morning. Thank you for speaking to us. All right. Of course, we leave it there, and that is Eskom CEO Ruyter clarifying a lot of things there, just when it comes to, of course, load shedding, the power outages that we've seen extended at that in other parts of Gauteng, city of Ekurhuleni, city of Tshwane experiencing those, including that date in Soweto, and the city mayor, that is, of course, Mpomerani, saying they would be sort of making that final announcement after the signing of the MOU between themselves and Eskom, that they would be taking over from Eskom in that particular township of Soweto, but also promising South Africans that you don't have to worry. You will be able to vote, and you will be able to enjoy your Christmas with lights.